Welcome, everybody. I am thrilled to see you here. This is our, fifth session. I want to thank the planning group, the planning committee for the Women of Teak Speaker Series has been working a lot of time on putting a 2023 calendar together, so we'll share more about that later. Welcome to those that are online. Brandy, they can hear me fine? Okay. Thank you to Government Relations. Jenny has a little cheering committee here from Austin, so thank y'all for coming. I know there's some folks here from Main Campus, from Forest Service, from TTI, so I love the opportunity that we're sharing this with our sister agencies and universities here at A&M. But before I get too far, I'm going to let Gordon come tell us a little bit about the facility we're at today, and then we'll dive in.
All right, no mic. I'll try to project. Good morning. Welcome to the Rankin Fire Training Field in Rascal City. Yes. So we're really pleased to host the Women of Teak. So welcome everyone. Welcome our guests also that are outside of the Teak agency. So a little bit about the history of the fire school. This part of Teaks was established and founded in 1929. We have a training mission, providing vocational and vocational services to the emergency response and incident management community. So it's grown quite a bit over the years. This facility now is comprised of 296 acres, so big training facility, over 1 square kilometer in size for our Canadian visitors, maybe. We stick with acres. It's big. Pre-COVID, this part of Teaks, we trained a little over 120,000 first responders, incident managers per year. Last year, we're kind of a rebound year. We got back up to 85,000. So we're growing again, and hopefully FY23 will continue to grow. But we're really pleased that y'all are here. Restrooms are located just behind you. There's coffee. In the event that we have a fire alarm in the building, our muster point, assembly point, is just across the street. Be careful if you have to cross the street. So it's big clear signs on an active road, but we're glad that y'all are here and let us know.
So thank you to ST for having us out here. There's a lot going on. If you had trouble parking, that's actually a good problem to have. Some of you may recall that the Women of Teak Speaker Series, the intent behind this was to say, hey, we're part of this huge, amazing A&M system filled with some successful leaders. They can come and share knowledge and challenges they've had in their career. And this is an opportunity for us to sit and grow and learn. So thank y'all for taking time out and doing something for you today. This is casual. Eat your lunch. There'll be time for questions at the end. But just to recap, we started off February with leadership lessons with Susan Balabina. We then moved to March with Emily Howell, who joined us today, and Lori DeVinny. And they talked about success strategies to be a superhero at work. If anybody has worn the little superhero masks, let me know. In May, we had local Brazos County Judge Amanda Maskey come talk to us about building your dream career. And just our last one in July, Dr. Annie McGowan from A&M Main Campus talked about building resilience through a growth mindset. So we have one more after this, and it's been a fun year, and we really appreciate the support and the attendance here. With that being said, I will read a little bit about Jenny so you know who's talking to y'all today, and then I'll let her step in. Jenny Jones was named Vice Chancellor for Government Relations of the A&M system by the Board of Regents in December of 2018. The A&M system Government Relations team has offices in Washington, D.C. and Austin, and the team of 20+ professionals provides a coordinated strategic approach to support the system's 11 universities and 8 state agencies at both state and federal levels. Mrs. Jones has been with the A&M system since 2006 and has worked for more than 20 years with the Texas legislature and stakeholders to provide legislative strategy, grassroots development, policy analysis, and coalition building to improve the lives of Texans. Prior to joining the A&M system, she led the legislative and political efforts for the Texas Dental Association as their chief lobbyist, and worked for 10 years at the Texas Medical Association in Public Health Policy as the legislative director. She earned a bachelor's degree from Morehead State University, a regional institution of higher education in Eastern Kentucky. She received a master's degree from Texas Tech University in linguistics. She was a doctoral candidate in the English department at Texas A&M before taking a leave of absence to begin her career working with the Texas legislature and Congress. She's been married to Stephen Jones for 14 years, and together they have a 12-year-old daughter. She's going to talk to us today about how politics almost saved me from being an athlete. So let's welcome her. And thank you for being here.
Thank you. So I've given some different versions of this talk. Is it okay if I like kind of walk around a little bit and you can hear me okay? So I've given some different versions of this talk over the years, how politics almost saved me from being an Aggie, because if you look back over my career, and I just was going to kind of meander around in it and talk about some different things that have happened. I have some good scoop for you along the way and some political things. But there are some interesting intersections, with A&M and different Aggies that have been really important in my career. And the other tagline I would give this speech is also how a few well-placed women made all the difference. So we'll kind of go through that. And I may not always look like it, but I'm usually flying by the seat of my pants. So I just kind of hammered this out yesterday. So we'll just kind of see how it goes. So I do want to thank Chancellor Sharp for this opportunity to be in this role. And, if you've been around the chancellor, you might just judge him as being somebody who is, a good old boy, and that might make you think he's, got old-fashioned views of what women can do. And I can tell you firsthand that ain't the case. And I really appreciate the fact that I have a lot of strong women counterparts, people like Kathy Banks. We have an agency director, Amy Swinford. Several regional presidents are women. And it's helpful, although the chancellor does like to introduce me as the meanest woman that he's ever met, except if he's already introducing Dr. Banks at that particular event that way, because it's usually either one of us that gets introduced that way. But, I think it's interesting to be a woman in a highly, male-oriented universe, like politics, the Texas Capitol. But it's also okay to sometimes fall into those gender roles like I did on Friday when the chancellor showed up at the Capitol with a little bit of tobacco stain on his shirt. And thanks to Emily, I whipped out a Tide pen, and we were, I was just going to go ahead and be the mom and help him get that stain out of his shirt. So anyway, I think there's, nothing wrong with that. So, but I do thank Chancellor Sharp for believing in me, and we've been through a lot together. So just a little bit kind of on my education and career and how I came to be around A&M. My parents, my father's first job after getting his PhD, he was a young faculty member, recruited a whole class of doctoral graduates from the University of Tennessee. And so he came and we moved here. I was in elementary school, and they were young graduate student, young new faculty, and just having the time of their lives. They play old time music. So I also play the fiddle. And so a lot of my time here was with a lot of English department faculty who became a band with my parents called the King's English String Band. And they used to play on Northgate. And so they would just take us with them to the bars because it was okay back then. There was a place called the Deluxe that used to be over there and see some shaking of heads. And that was a big hangout for the King's English String Band. And some of them will play a role in my career a little bit later on that I'll tell you about. So I grew up around A&M. I ran track. We got to run track on Kyle Field. I'm sure that doesn't happen anymore for, middle schoolers, maybe. My 4-H club sold Cokes, at the football games. And that's when I, came to love the Fightin' Texas Aggie Band. And even this last weekend, which was disastrous in many ways, when they first stepped off, I almost, can cry just thinking about it. So anyway, those of you who've also been around and grown up, went to school here, whatever it is, you know what that is, and it's hard to convey to people. grew up going to Bonfire. We lived in Eastgate. I don't even know if it's called Eastgate anymore. See, people know what I'm talking about. So we would ride our bikes, you know, over from Eastgate. We could walk to Bonfire back in the day. My brother was actually a student on campus when Bonfire happened. And so that was a really scary time, and a very sad time still. So anyway, we moved away. My father was recruited to become a department chair, which was a big deal. And when you're a college professor, if you get to move up that ladder, you take it. So we left when I was in 8th grade. And boy, they brainwash you with the schools here. I'm sure it's still the same way. I felt like every school, you know, whether it was Oakwood Middle School or the junior high, the color was A&M, and you were somehow on the path, you know, to going to A&M when you were living here. So we moved away in 8th grade, and I ended up going to, got a scholarship to Morehead State University, had a wonderful time there. And then luckily my father was recruited back to Texas. He knew my grandparents were all still alive. They knew they wanted to come back. We all came back in 1992, and I got a graduate teaching assistantship at Texas Tech. So I thought I was going to follow in my dad's footsteps and be a college professor. It looked like a great life, thinking back to, you know, all the good times at Northgate and roaming around on the A&M campus. I was like, of course I'm going to do that. After I finished my degree at Tech in linguistics, which you're probably like, what the hell is that? And what do you do with it? It's actually served me very well in my career in public policy, because it's all about really understanding the English language and how to get what you want by using it. And so I then was accepted into the PhD program here at Texas A&M, which was a dream come true. And there was a really neat program at the time in the English department. So I'm really, really following in his footsteps at this point. It gets even spookier. So a program called Discourse Studies, which brought together linguistics, literature, and rhetoric. Really cool stuff. So I came here in 1994 and started working on my PhD. And about a year into it, I was feeling really burned out, and I was like, I don't want to teach another summer semester. And so I had this idea that maybe I would just go over to Austin for the summer, take a little break. And so I went to the director of graduate studies at the time. His name was Dr. Clint Mahan. I think he still lives over on Walton Avenue. And he was also the guitar player in the King's English String Band. So I had grown up at his house, had seen my parents having a great time at their house. So we played with their kids and everything, still good friends to this day. And so I went in and saw Dr. Mahan and said, I need to take a break. I'm going to go to Austin. He's like, you're not going to come back. You're going to get a job over there, and you're going to start getting this paycheck, and you're not going to come back. I was like, whatever. But he was right. So what happened was I moved over here. I dragged my little sister along with me. She was always a good partner in crime. And I moved to Austin, and I just started applying for temporary jobs, you know, through temp agencies. And I got a job. I had some jobs first that were, you know, like data entry. I was terrible with that. And then I got one at the Texas Medical Association. I remember the people at the temp agency saying, this is a really great opportunity. Wear a suit. I was like, okay, I'll do that. I can do that. So I go, and it was a secretary, it was an admin job, and they were just looking for a temp. But really what they were doing is they were trying out, you know, somebody for a permanent position. And so about 6 weeks in, the director said, you know, you can write and you can walk and talk, and you have a master's degree. So when I left when I ultimately decided to leave, which came a little later, my dad said, you know, your master's degree can pay itself off. And my master's degree helped me get that job. I didn't know it. I thought my master's degree was only going to help me get a PhD, but it helped me get this job that made all the difference. And so at TMA is a you know, big player in the Texas Capitol. At the time, they had 40,000 members, physicians across the state, a big policy operation. You know, they are part of the American Medical Association, which sets health policy for, you know, organized medicine in the United States. So big deal. And they offered me a permanent position. This was the summer of 1995, and they told me I would make $25,000. And I was like, holy cow, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to take this job, and Dr. Mahan's right. I'm never going back to Texas A&M. Although sometimes I still think I can finish that PhD. So it's interesting that $25,000 is the same salary that my dad was offered when we left A&M and moved to Eastern Kentucky in 1983, not too long before. So you could immediately see the difference between the college professor pay scale and the organized medicine lobby pay scale. So anyway, it was just a matter of time before I really, found my groove with working in public health policy. I staffed the Council on Public Health for the TMA. I worked on the Committee on Adolescent and Child Health and the Committee on Cancer. And so I got a lot of different health policy issues under my belt. And, the main issues that physicians join the TMA for are lobbying against managed care and lobbying against the insurance companies who to this day play all kinds of games with patients and physicians. And I wasn't in that, in that part of the organization, but the big time lobbyists who were fighting all those fights, they needed somebody to cover the House Public Health Committee, which by the way is meeting today. And boy, you want to talk about a committee that deals with everything under the sun. Just tune into one of their hearings today. They're actually talking about rural health. And one of the women I'm going to talk about, Dr. Nancy Dickey, is actually testifying there today. So this is also kind of an interesting little, everything comes full circle, right? So the big time lobbyists at the TMA said, we want you to join the lobby team. And I was like, wow, I am really, going to the dark side now. So then I became a registered lobbyist and got to work on the main bill that I got to work on in my first session was called Senate Bill 19, and it was championed by Senator Jane Nelson, another well-placed woman that I'll talk about. Senator Nelson just finished being the Senate Finance Chair and the longest serving Republican in the Texas Senate. She chaired the Finance Committee for the last 4 sessions, and she has been a wonderful friend to Texas A&M. She's a very dear personal friend of Chancellor Sharp's, and we're going to miss her in the Texas legislature. But back in the 2001 session, I worked with her on a bill to, and that this was a big issue for the physicians. It was to address childhood obesity and increase the amount of physical education in the public school curriculum. And so that was kind of my first, taste of, wow, I have this little bill, but this really important lady named Senator Nelson, it's her bill, and we're going to get to pass this bill, which we did. And so that was really cool. And I saw that, you could actually make a difference with words, back to being an English major, words matter. And one of the things that I negotiated at the end of that session was the number of minutes. And I remember going back and forth between the House member and Senator Nelson, and it was going to be, 75 minutes, or it was going to be 105 minutes. And so that negotiation was an important learning moment for me. And so then there was a big political earthquake that happened in 2002. In 2002, the Republican Party took the Texas House for the first time since Reconstruction. They had a majority, and they later elected Speaker Tom Craddock as a Republican leader of the Texas House. The governor's race that year was a big fight between Governor Rick Perry and a Democrat named Tony Sanchez, who challenged him. The doctors were really mad at Governor Perry because he had vetoed one of our big wins in 2001 was a bill to address prompt pay by managed care companies. Managed care companies would float payment to physicians so that they would earn more interest, and they would wait until the last minute to send them their payment, no matter if they filled all the forms out right and it was a clean claim. And so we had passed this bill, the big lobbyists, because remember, I was over here working on childhood obesity and PE, right? Which ended up being our biggest victory that we could tout to our members, because the governor vetoed our, what was going to be the big win, prompt pay. And so the doctors were so mad that they went out. I mean, the doctors are pretty conservative people, and they went out on a limb and they endorsed Tony Sanchez. And so this was, a big political fight. And I just think it's interesting that we have yet another intersection of Aggie land in my career with Governor Perry, obviously a former student, class of 72 with Chancellor Sharp. And so obviously Governor Perry beat the tar out of Tony Sanchez, I think by 18 points or something, even though he put $60 million of his own money into that campaign. So that's kind of crazy to think about. And then afterwards, and this is just, retribution is part of politics. We like to say that, Texas politics is a full contact sport, and in true fashion, Governor Perry, didn't really want those lobbyists around in the next session who had gotten the doctors to endorse his opponent. And so, those guys who had been my mentors and who had taught me everything about, the public policy process and how politics does drive the process. And that's what forms the policy, and that's what you have to work within. And that, to me, I still believe that good things come out of that process. It is really hard to pass a bill. It's easier to kill a bill in the Texas legislature. We do both. Seems like a mean thing to do, to kill somebody's bill, but sometimes you just have to do it. And you can do it behind closed doors in the dead of night, and nobody will know. And sometimes that's what it takes. So, it's not maybe the most cuddly world to be in. And so these guys who had brought me onto the legislative affairs team, they were kind of forced out. And so not just because I was in the right place at the right time, although I was at that point the only registered lobbyist left working for TMA, because other people had left. They kind of saw the writing on the wall. But I was able, in the 2003 session, I became the interim legislative director. I had a team of high-powered contract lobbyists that we brought on, that the doctors brought on, because they knew we needed some more people. And we hired a couple of young people out of the Capitol. But I was the most senior person on the staff, the lobby staff for the Texas Medical Association, which in hindsight is sort of terrifying for them. But we ended up having a remarkable session, and the interesting thing, the big issue was medical liability reform. And if you were paying attention and you were around then, doctors were getting sued. There were these counties that were deemed judicial hellholes. Sorry, it's the second time I've said hell today, but it's kind of the world we live in, dealing with elected officials. But so there were, these frivolous lawsuits being brought against physicians, particularly in the Valley, particularly in the coastal bend. Nueces County was terrible. Hidalgo County was another place where physicians were just, they were being sued out of practice, and for their medical liability insurance was prohibitively, they weren't able to even get it in some cases. If you were an OB-GYN, a neurosurgeon in particular, it was really terrible. And so the doctors were ready to have a big win after, the embarrassment of losing in that governor's race and having their big prompt pay bill, vetoed by the governor. And so we put a lot of work in. We had a lot of policy research that went into what would be the solution for medical liability reform in the state of Texas. And we had a whole panel of witnesses. We brought in rural family practice doctors. We brought in OB-GYNs. We brought in psychiatrists. We brought in neurosurgeons, including one named Dr. Greg Bonin, who I'll also talk about a little bit later, who was one of our witnesses. And I personally handled him in the Capitol, and he gave great testimony about, just wanting to practice neurosurgery and being afraid every day of the next lawsuit being around the corner. And so we did all of the groundwork and all of the testimony and all of the things during the legislative process to get to the point of being able to pass a bill called HB4. And there was HB4 and HB3. HB3 was the constitutional amendment. It might have been the other way around. I can't remember, but the constitutional amendment, which was going to be necessary for voters to approve a cap on non-economic damages. And that was what was going to make the difference and take the incentive out of these frivolous lawsuits. And so at the time, the lieutenant governor was David Dewhurst, and we had passed the bill out of the House no problem, because remember, we had Speaker Craddock. The Texans for Lawsuit Reform was a big part of the plan behind getting a Republican majority in the Texas House, because they wanted to pass tort reform, and medical liability reform was the big kind of, big foundation for that. And so getting it through the House was not a problem. Well, there were some problems, but we got it through the House. And then in the Senate, it sat in committee. They took testimony. The State Affairs Chairman was a wonderful senator by the name of Bill Ratliff, who was elected to be the lieutenant governor by his peers for the interim time when Governor Perry had been the lieutenant governor. George Bush became the president. Perry became the governor. And then the Senate elected Bill Ratliff. So that was kind of another interesting thing to be around at that time. But Senator Ratliff was a very thoughtful man. He's still alive. He's an engineer. And so he really was troubled at the idea of taking the cap on non-economic damages down to $250,000, because if you are losing your livelihood because of a botched surgery, is that all you're going to get on the non-economic damages, the pain and suffering side of things? And so, and the Senate was troubled by this too. And so they just didn't think they could get there. It was too much. And we were really running out of time. And, I had this big lobby team. Nobody could figure out what to do. And then one day the lieutenant governor called over to the TMA and talked to our general counsel, Rocky Wilcox, who just recently stepped down, and said, I need you to send me some good doctors over here that I can talk to. We're going to have to negotiate this out. And so there just happened to be in town 2 doctors who were very close with Governor Perry, and I knew that would be helpful. And one of them they were both orthopedic surgeons who were also a big target. You think about all the surgeries they do and high consequence procedures. And so I grabbed these 2. They had just gone into the Texas Chili Parlor and they were going to eat their lunch, and they had ordered. And I said, too bad, we have to go now. We're going now to meet with Governor Dewhurst. It's interesting, if you're addressing the lieutenant governor, you call him like Governor Patrick, Governor Dan Patrick, even though, they're the lieutenant governor. So I said, we got to go see Governor Dewhurst now. So I whisked them over there. And we go in and we're in this really grand room. I think it's called the Lieutenant Governor's Reception Room or something. It used to be an apartment, and there still is an apartment in the Capitol. The Texas Speaker actually has an apartment, a residence, and it's, I think, maybe the only state capitol that has a residence in it. But on the lieutenant governor side, on the Senate side, it's just kind of this grand reception room. You can have dinners in there and so forth. So we go in there, and he's got Senator Ratliff, and they're wanting to talk to us about, do you have any wiggle room? Can we make it $750,000? Could we make it $1 million? We just think $250,000 is taking it down too low. It's, the playing field is not going to be level for patients who are injured and need compensation. So next thing you know, we've got the House sponsor. His name was Joe Nixon. He's not in the legislature anymore. He comes over, and he was a bull in a china cabinet. And so he's sitting there with Senator Ratliff, and he just is being really kind of rude to him and saying, we're not going to back off. The House has to have $250,000. And I am the only woman in the room. So that's kind of the story about this whole negotiation. I'm the only woman in the room the whole time when this major groundbreaking national model legislation gets passed. And I was, not experienced enough to be in this situation, but I winged it, okay? Because, back to the right place at the right time. I remember what I was wearing, and I would have chosen a different outfit if I had known what was going to happen that day. I had these little red mule sandals on that were not really dressy enough to be where I was, and I had a skirt suit that was maybe a little too short. But anyway, I felt good when I walked out the door. In hindsight, maybe a pantsuit would have been better. Anyway, so we end up going through these whole negotiations. Governor Dewhurst literally picks Joe Nixon up and kicks him out of the room. So now we're kind of realizing we're on the Senate's, we're kind of aligned with them now, but we need to go talk to the House. So Governor Dewhurst sends us over to talk to Speaker Craddock, and that was a terrible meeting. He yelled at us. He brought his henchmen in to yell at us. They offered us some cookies while we were there, because we hadn't eaten lunch. This was probably 2 or 3 in the afternoon. We'd been over, trying to talk to Governor Dewhurst and Ratliff. They said, y'all better go try to talk to House, work something out with them. Or this is just, we're going to be at an impasse. We're not going to be able to pass this bill. And so we go over there, we kind of get yelled at, and there were Governor Perry's friends were in there too. Mike Toomey and Bill Messer, is who it was. They're our friends today, but not that day. They weren't our friends. So they're yelling at us that we're selling out and blah, blah, blah. And the tort reform guys are going to be mad at us. And that we're just, crumbling, just a bunch of wimpy doctors. So anyway, we just kind of get yelled at. We don't even eat those cookies. They put them on the table. We're just like, whatever. So then we go back over to the Senate, which at that point feels like a safe place. So they put us in this little room called the Ramsey Room. And if you're ever in the Capitol, I would love to take you and show you to the Ramsey Room, because to me, that's what I will always remember about the Ramsey Room. So it's dragging on to the evening now, and we still haven't eaten. And they send in another wonderful senator. His name was Bob Dole, and he was a family physician. And they send him in, and he realizes that we haven't eaten. And so he arranges, because there's a working kitchen in the lieutenant governor's reception room. And so they brought us, and it to this day is the most delicious meal that you could think of after being in this situation. It was chicken salad sandwiches and a gigantic bowl of Ruffles potato chips and brownies. I mean, my mouth is watering just thinking about it, because we were so hungry and beaten down. We'd been calling our people, can you come up with any other ideas? We still hadn't come up, but we knew time was running out. If we didn't come up with something today that the House would accept and the Senate would accept, this whole thing was going to blow up and we were going to be done. Well, one of those doctors came up with the idea of, what if there could be 3 $250,000 caps, so that you could sue Dr. A, you could sue Dr. B, and you could sue Hospital C, and then that would get it up to $750,000. That's what ended up being the agreed to negotiation. And we came out at 11:30 at night. There were all these reporters waiting outside the Ramsey Room. I mean, and I'm in this suit, not with the right shoes, like great. And we come out and it's like, we are rock stars, because we've, found a way. This is a huge issue for Texas, for, really the US, and a lot of states followed suit and passed the same bill. I got to go fly to South Carolina and tell them how we passed this bill. I wore a different suit that day. But anyway, only woman in the room. But, the only person who said something about that was actually Governor David Dewhurst. And he said, and as this was at the end when we had the agreement, he said, I don't think he called me little lady, but he might have. He said something about, I look forward to getting to know this little lady, and you've done a great job. And, it's just funny, in these situations, you just kind of think, okay, that was his comment. That's okay. So anyway, that was, I've always kept in mind the fact that, so that, that launched my career, right, in the Capitol. After that, we went and passed the constitutional amendment to approve the cap on non-economic damages, the way that I described it. And then I decided I'd done everything I could to make the doctors happy, and I was ready to go somewhere else. I didn't know where it was going to be. And I ended up going to the Texas Dental Association, which is a great little lobby job, because they don't have big, huge, gigantic problems like the doctors. They have enough problems that they need a lobbyist. They're a lot of fun. And two people that had a role in hiring me, and again, this comes back to Aggieland. I don't know if any of you knew Herb Wade. He's a long practicing pediatric dentist here. He was my dentist when I lived here, and he was the outgoing president of the Texas Dental Association when I interviewed with them, along with the president, Dr. Pat Blanton, who is very close. She's a periodontist in Dallas, and very involved in what was then called the Baylor College of Dentistry, which is now, of course, the A&M School of Dentistry. And so I did that job for a couple of years, and then I got a call from Nancy Dickey. And that's what brought me back to Aggieland. And Nancy Dickey, who I'd gotten to know when I was at TMA, because she was the president of the American Medical Association, the first woman to ever do that, got to know her then. She called and said, I was given your name and I remember who you are, and I need somebody to come help me get $20 million for the A&M College of Medicine. Will you interview, and apply for this job? And I thought, $20 million is a lot of money, but okay, I'll, interview for this job. Well, I got the job. She was the president of the A&M Health Science Center. We ended up getting not $20 million, but $33 million. This was in the 2007 session. And it was thanks to an Aggie appropriator by the name of Steve Ogden, Senator Steve Ogden, who followed in the footsteps of Bill Ratliff and very much had that mentality. And I just have to kind of make a side note of Aggie appropriators, because it is really great to have an Aggie appropriator. We've had a long string of them. And another one that I'll mention is Tommy Williams, former senator. I was the interim director of interim vice chancellor for governmental relations before Tommy Williams came to be our vice chancellor. So I was kind of a placeholder, and I knew that. And I remember the chancellor telling me, Tommy Williams is going to come be our vice chancellor. And I can't say what I said, but I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy, because he was a senator. And I was like, wow, he's going to come work with us in governmental relations. And it was wonderful having him. And then after he left, I became the interim vice chancellor again. And after about a year, that's when the chancellor said, well, he didn't tell me directly, he told Billy Hamilton, and you guys that know Billy Hamilton, Billy Hamilton sometimes brings you bad news from the chancellor that you've done something wrong, and sometimes he brings you good news. And in this case, it was good news, and it was the chancellor wants to make you the vice chancellor. But other Aggie appropriators that have been of consequence to us, the Honorable John Otto, who passed away from pancreatic cancer. He was a member of our governmental relations team when we lost him on August 1st of 2020. And we miss him very much, but he was a fantastic Aggie appropriator, and we like him to shovel the money to us over here in Brazos County. And he did that, but he did it in all the right ways. It was never underhanded or anything, and just did some really other wonderful things for Texas A&M that I don't have time to go into. And so then you have today, once again, we have an Aggie House Appropriations Committee Chairman, Greg Bonin, who I mentioned, and he has been wonderful for us in giving us all kinds of opportunities. But with that $33 million, that's how we founded the Round Rock campus, if you guys are familiar with it. And Dr. Nancy Dickey oversaw all of that and has worked so hard for A&M Medicine, and I'm glad she's in the Capitol today, carrying that message. And, you know, I just, when I think about TEEX, and it's funny, the Women of TEEX speaker series, I mean, I think a lot of people would think, wait, there's women in TEEX? What is that about? Because, you know, you think TEEX, I mean, I always say, well, you know, TEEX, it's Task Force One, and they're the ones that go, you know, they're the Aggies who run towards disasters, because that's what you do. But, you know, there's some women involved. And so that's what I think is so cool about the speaker series. And, you know, again, I think back to just the different women that I have, you know, that have been well placed at the right point in time. And I feel like that's what has allowed me to do what I've been able to do. I've been in the right place at the right time, but you also have to know, you got to know the facts, you got to know your stuff. And for me with the legislature, it's that politics drives the process, which drives the policy. And if you can always backtrack through that and work through that framework, because that's the reality of it, then you're going to get to where you need to go. And so I do have to acknowledge, you know, and I didn't even know this, but we have a team of 23, I think, governmental relations people between our Washington office and the Austin office. And I'd never looked before at what the percentage was, but 56% of those FTEs are women. So we have more women on that team, and 4 of them are here. Well, Kirby, you stand up too. So I want you guys to stand up. So these are some of, and I didn't know they were coming. I didn't know they were coming. And so I just, you know, that's just another thing I wanted to, you know, you don't always have to keep track, and you don't always have to count. But when I counted that up, I was like, huh, interesting. I didn't know. I didn't know if it was more women or more men. Just kind of is what it is. So anyway, we all are excited about next session. And what we're going to be focused on is making the hopes and dreams of people like Director Coatney come true in the Texas legislature. And we've been working very hard on what those hopes and dreams are, putting them to paper. And so I couldn't be more grateful for the team that we have, for the leadership that we have. It's really a wonderful group of people, and the things that we do, I mean, it's sometimes hard. I think maybe the hardest thing about this job is feeling like you really can ever completely represent what the A&M system does and stands for. I think people in this state have bits and pieces that they might know of, depending on where they are. They might know, you know, A&M Texarkana, if that's where they live, or they might know, the Forest Service, if that's who they've encountered. But there's just so much to share and tell, and I feel like we can never, really boil it all down, but we will do our best. The Texas legislature, it's in the Constitution. It starts the second Tuesday of January in every even or odd numbered year. We have a joke that we think is really funny, which is, the session is supposed to be 140 days long every other year. We think it'd be really funny if it was 2 days long every 140 years. But we will pack everything that we can into those 140 days. And we have really been preparing for months and months and months. And so I just, again, I'm blessed to not have to think about, am I the only woman in the room, or how many women do we have on our team? I don't have to think about it. But I think what it means to be a woman of TEKS is to be in the right place at the right time. And that's not something you can plan or manufacture. It's something that happens, but you have to be prepared for when you are in that right place at the right time. So I'll stop there. I think I got most of the good juicy things in there that I wanted to, especially that skirt and those shoes I was wearing that day. If there was one thing I could redo, that would be it. But anyway, thank you so much for having me. This is a really, really cool thing. And thank you to Tracy for doing this. I do think we need to do more things like this, where we take a little minute, with our friends and colleagues, and just, let's talk about where we are and what we do. So thank you all for what you do.
We have some time for questions.
You can ask me anything. I mean, these ladies will tell you, you can ask me just about anything.
Kim?
So I have a question. You said that you can't plan or manufacture those moments, but to be prepared for them. What kind of advice do you have for upcoming leaders, whether they're not prepared for this?
I never said no to any assignment. Like any assignment that I was given, I would always say, yeah, I'll go do that. Because you never know what you might get out of it. Even if it's, being a courier and, doing something that you might feel like is mindless or beneath you. You never know where it's going to put you. And I mean, like taking that temporary job as a secretary job. And I think, the other things, you'll be doing things that are going to pay off that you might think is just a step in the process. Like my master's degree, I thought that was just a step in the process. Just really, it served its own purpose. And so I think sometimes we have these grand plans and you think, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'll get to do this. Well, after the second step, there might be some other door that opens that you just don't know about. So I think sometimes people plan too much, and you just need to take that next assignment. Yeah.
I was just wondering, how important do you think education is for advancement if you maybe lack a little bit in education and you're a little bit older and that task seems very daunting?
Well, I still wish there was a way to finish my PhD. That'd be a great thing, but it's really just kind of an ego thing, right? I mean, what's it going to do for me at this point? I'm not going to go teach. I'm going to keep doing this as long as I can, until I make John Sharp mad, which I've done before. I mean, I think there are more options now than spending 4 more years doing a PhD. And so I think that's where higher ed has been really slow to adapt to giving people, micro credentials. I hate these buzzwords, but something that is a shorter path where you could say, oh, well, now I've got this skill that's recognized and it's a certificate or whatever it is. I mean, I think sometimes, and this is a terrible thing to say as somebody that is an advocate for higher education, but sometimes it's just having a credential. Does the school matter? Yes. But is it the end of the day, if you didn't go to the very best school, lots of people succeed with a bachelor's degree from, I mean, I have a bachelor's degree from a school that most people think is in a different state. There is another Morehead State University. I think it's in Wisconsin or something. I don't know. But usually when I tell people that's where I went to school, they think of that other school. I'm like, no, this is the one in Eastern Kentucky that you've never heard of. So I think it depends, you know, and is it about advancement within the track that you're on or taking a different route? But I think higher ed needs to do more work on making things more accessible and not 4 more years. Because you have a life to live too, right? That's what's always kept me from going back.
Online question. What has been the most rewarding part of your career?
The skirt with the red shoes.
You know, the thing that makes me cry is when I go to any of our graduations, because seeing those people walk across that stage, I mean, that's really that's the core of what we're here for. And I think that's what I always go back to. We are changing people's lives and changing their families' lives and changing the lives of their kids and their grandkids to come when they walk across that stage.
Do you want an invitation to our line worker academy graduation next Thursday?
Yes, yes. I need to come to that.
There you go.
Yeah.
Next Thursday.
Okay. Yeah.
At Round.
Okay. I'll come. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Back here.
Thank you for coming, I appreciate it. Real quick question for you. Being a female in a male-dominated area and working with people who are very steadfast in their ways or have an idea, culture idea, how did you get past some of those things? How did you kind of move beyond those and make a presence in the ring but not be that?
Yeah, because it's, you know, I never made it an issue about, like I could have, when I was being the interim vice chancellor, I could have said, well, you know, you've never had a woman do this job. Because I think I'm the first woman to do this job, but I never said that to try to get the job, you know? I think, I mean, it goes back to knowing your stuff, and they can't argue against that. And really in the legislative process, yeah, there's always politics, and yeah, somebody's always given more money or, you know, had a better relationship or known that member longer or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, that, you know, that debate happens out on the House floor, in the Senate floor, in committees, in public. And, you know, if you've got the better argument and the better information to support it, you're gonna win. And, so I think I've always relied on that, and just figuring out a lot of what we deal with in the Capitol is, you know, the door will get shut in your face and you got to figure out where the window is, and just not, I mean, it sounds trite, but not giving up, because sometimes you can just outlast people. And maybe there's a little mean streak that makes that possible, but yeah, I like to win. I like for us to win. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Anything online?
Yes, hang on. It says, how can we be more supportive of our female leaders such as yourself?
I think the best way to do that is give everybody a fair shot. And, you know, I don't think women need different support. I really don't. I think everybody just needs a fair shot, and for the door to be open for everybody to, you know, to get through on their own merits. And, you know, that's how you end up with a team that happens to have more women than men. It might be the next, you know, might flip the next year. It just depends on, you know, depends on what the needs are. So I think, yeah, that's how I would answer that.
Sarah, you want to close out that? Sure.
If I can get out of my chair. All right, well, thank you so much, Jenny, and thank all of y'all for being our champions at the legislature. We certainly appreciate it. I just want to highlight a few things that Jenny talked about and that I think are really impactful. One of the things that she talked about, accepting the job through the temp agency. And to me, that shows a lot of humility. So I think that's a really key thing. Never be too proud to apply for something because again, you never know what doors that may open. I've applied at a temp agency before and it definitely opened doors for me, my mom as well. So I couldn't agree with you more on that. Two is that words matter. I think that's such an all-encompassing statement too. I really appreciate that. I come from a family of literature lovers, so that speaks to my heart. If you find yourself in the right place at the right time, I think fake it till you make it. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, it works for me. It works for me. Yep.
I think that's hilarious. and I love that. But, be prepared. And I think really what I got out of that too is, having confidence and actually caring about what you're doing. And collaboration is key. So, you spoke a lot about the people around you. And I feel the same way about the people I'm surrounded with at work. So collaboration is definitely key. And lastly, it's who you know. No, a little bit maybe. Aggies are awesome. So there's that. A couple little other notes. Again, thank y'all for coming all the way from Austin to be with us. Oh, also side note, my nieces have pictures of the superhero mask, like one of my favorite pictures. So side note. Our last speaker for this year will be Christine Ramirez. She's the training manager for ILIPS, for those of y'all that don't know, on November 11th. We will be wrapping up the year with our annual food drive for Thanksgiving, which we did last year, if y'all remember. As well, we're going to invite all of the speakers to our annual employee appreciation lunch on December 16th. So Jenny, we hope you can make it to that. This is to show our gratitude to all of those who have made our inaugural year so incredible. We could obviously not have done this without y'all, so we appreciate it. And lastly, we look forward to next year and hosting Amy Faulkner. She's the executive director for Voices of the Children at PCS. Monica Martinez, the director of crisis communications at Texas A&M University, and Joni Taylor, our own A&M women's basketball coach. Just to name a few, we have several others planned. So look forward to that. And thank you to everyone who always helps to put these together and for everyone attending both online and in person. We really appreciate it. Thank you.